Hi, thank you for joining me. In this video, I'll be talking about difference and diversity in people and why it's necessary. One of the biggest sources of conflict in this world is inability to accept difference. Many wars have happened because of intolerance to differences. There's an obsession with what people are and being normal. You have to tick all these boxes to be acceptable, but this is completely unrealistic. Every person is unique. You have your own genetic code that makes you who you are. Human beings are driven by emotions, and difference stirs up a lot of emotion because people are afraid of the unfamiliar and they're uncomfortable with what they don't understand. For centuries, people with physical or neurological differences, or who just live their lives differently to most, were feared and rejected by society. People thought they were evil or cursed, and they were isolated, abused, and sometimes killed because people didn't understand that a lot of differences are just biological. Unfortunately, this still goes on in some parts of the world. We're different in so many ways: appearance, beliefs, lifestyle, yet society has this need to try and make everyone the same, get everyone to follow the same life path and never do anything beyond what has been set out as a normal life or what society will accept. People who make different life choices to the usual or traditional often face criticism and hostility from other people, even within their own families, because there is this ideal image of how you should be and what you should do that's been defined as a normal life or being normal. Then there's everything outside of that. There's this idea in society that everyone who's a bit different needs to be fixed, have their head examined and be reprogrammed to be normal. If you look at the word normal, all it means is the most common way to be or to live. I don't like to use the term normal or abnormal. To explain it very simply, typical means the most common, the majority, more than 50%. Atypical means less common, the minority, less than 50%. A lot of people have something, either physically or mentally, where they're in the minority. Sometimes parts of your brain and your nervous system develop atypically, which means they take a different direction. So you have a part of you that is different to the majority. And unfortunately, minorities get persecuted. When you move outside the usual way of life, other people start trying to pull you back in because that's what makes sense to them. And they want to turn you into what they understand because that's easier for them than changing their thinking. But it's so short-sighted because human beings are not supposed to be all just the same. That's why we were given minds to think. Not everyone wants to do the usual or the expected thing. There isn't a one-size-fits-all when it comes to living life. People have different needs. I wish we could get rid of all the social pressure to do things just because it's what's been done before. It's what society expects, and it's the most common thing to do, because it puts people in bondage and it causes damage. Doing something just because you feel you have to, when it's not what you really want, creates resentment and dissatisfaction. People do end up having mental breakdowns from living a life they don't really want, that's been forced upon them. It can drive people to do extreme things. Sometimes they turn to drink, drugs, gambling, and other things like that as a way to cope. They might hide it all from the world, but they look for ways to compensate and get some relief from their daily life. Over time, it all gets worse. The problem gets bigger, and the effects can be serious, because you can't force yourself to be happy in something if you're not. If it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. Nothing can change that. Dissatisfaction is good because if we had no dissatisfaction, we would never do anything. It's an indication that something is wrong, and it's a very powerful driving force. But while you stay in such a situation and don't address the issues, you're just stuck with the dissatisfaction, which is soul destroying, and it gets stronger to the point where you can't ignore it anymore. This is why it really helps to have high cognitive functioning, which means a high level of thinking skills, because then you can get yourself out of situations and get to where you want to be a lot more easily, because you can find the solutions and strategies. You don't have to be super intelligent, you just have to exercise your mind regularly, the same way you do your body. People laugh at deep thinking, but it's one of your greatest allies. It gets you out of situations, it enables you to make better decisions, and it opens up new worlds. When you exercise your body, your muscles get stronger. The same thing's true when you exercise your mind. It becomes sharper and more skilled. You develop more neural pathways, and they become a part of you. What is so easily forgotten is that the world needs all kinds of people. It wouldn't work if everyone was the same and did all the same things. New and different ideas are what has changed the world and brought us to the far more comfortable lifestyle that we have now. We're supposed to think and create. If it wasn't for people doing that, we would still be running around in animal skins. A lot of the people who brought us all the things we have now faced criticism and abuse. People laughed and said they were crazy until their inventions worked. Now, we can't imagine being without them. Often people see something that's different as a threat or something to fear. That's because human beings are pack animals. We're tribal by nature. In primitive society, caveman times, a person from another tribe was an enemy, so you would respond aggressively. We have a strong need to be accepted because back then it was necessary for survival. We lived together in tribes for protection, as you were very unlikely to survive on your own, so you had to be like everyone else. Back then, there was only one way to live. You were born and raised, you hunted for food, you reproduced, then you died. That was it. There was no choosing a career or relocating. Life was simply about survival, so you needed a lot more physical skills and instinctive reactions. You had to be strong, you had to be fast, you had to be alert, and you had to respond to threat instantly, otherwise you would get killed. We've moved beyond that now. We still have those primal instincts, but we have to look beyond them, because our way of life has changed so drastically, and they don't work so well now. We no longer have to fight wild animals and hunt for food. We live in a civilized society now, and that requires a different set of skills. The skills we need now are thinking skills. There are times when instinctive reactions are necessary, but in modern society, it's also very necessary to look beyond your initial reactions and examine, look at things in more depth, because a lot of situations are not straightforward, even if they appear to be. Modern life needs logical reasoning, problem solving, and intellect. I think all this should be taught in school from an early age, because it's as important as being able to read and write. How you get on in life has a lot to do with your level of cognitive functioning, and the earlier that's developed, the easier it is. Not being like the majority can make people feel isolated, scared, and vulnerable, so they try and force themselves into that box because of the fear of being alone and the feeling of safety in numbers. But actually, when you stop caring about the status quo and fitting into that box of normal, you have so many more choices. The world is your oyster. There are so many differences and minorities in this world. We have to embrace them instead of fearing them. Underneath it all, we're all just human beings. And see the person, not the label. There is no such thing as normal. It's all just numbers. That's it. I hope this has been helpful. Thank you for watching. See you next time.